Hey, what's up gamers, and well, time to take a look at my most anticipated game of 2024, Contra Operation Galuga. Yeah, I pronounced the name right this time. On the Nintendo Switch, obviously, which is the one I went for, and it's also available, obviously, on the PlayStation 4 and 5, as well as the Xbox consoles, and also available to download and play on Steam. But as you know, I downloaded it on the Nintendo Switch because, like most multiple console-released games, I like to be able to play it at home and take it on trips. So, how does the game that I've most anticipated for 2024 hold up? Is it as great as I hoped it would be? It's good. Let's take a deeper look, shall we? Well, as you know, as a fan of this whole franchise, which started out great with its arcade counterparts, especially with the first game, and then its sequel, Super Contra, eventually getting its ports to the home consoles, and then getting a couple of sequels for the Super NES and Sega Genesis, which you can go alone, team up with the second player to take down enemies and aliens, ending with a boss fight at the end of each stage. And each game, as you know, got harder and harder, especially when released in the United States. Just take a look at my full review on the whole memories thing and you'll know what I'm talking about. But yeah, this was a fantastic action-packed series, which was fun, but difficult at the same time. And seeing it slowly take a decline, which I can understand it wanted to make the leap into 3D, but no. This is a franchise that was made to be in 2D, and especially after this crap. So I ain't got much more to say. I was anticipating this one because it looked like it was going back to the main roots of what made Contra great. And it plays and looks great. Don't get me wrong, after playing the demo I got all hyped, but maybe a little too hyped. Because after paying the full price on this one, well, I guess you could say it left a little to be desired. But let's talk about the good things. Number one, the arcade mode, and of course the story mode. Yeah, they're kind of not really much different. I mean, if you choose story mode, it has cutscenes, dialogue, which thankfully you can skip if you just want to get to the game, like most of the fans of this franchise do. But it actually is pretty fascinating. And it gets you to know the characters and everybody a lot better because you do meet them along the way throughout the entire game. And also on both story and arcade mode, you can choose from 3 different difficulties. And as you can tell, I'm not exactly a pro at this franchise. Yeah, I suck pretty bad. And yes, you also have the option to choose between one-hit deaths, which is pretty much the traditional way in most of the Contra games. Or if you want to ease up the difficulty like I did, as you can tell, you can choose the health meter option, which definitely makes the gameplay a bit more easier. Say what you want to, because like I said, I'm not exactly pro at this game. Because yeah, like the other games in this franchise, it can be pretty damn hard. Enemies, enemy fire, projectiles, everything all over out to kill you. So as difficult as it may seem, it should seem very familiar for any fans of the previous games in this franchise. The good games in this franchise, to be exact, because it's a 2D side-scroller, but with 3D graphics, and occasionally a bit of a 3D feel. If you play through this game, that is. You'll know what I'm talking about, moments like these, where it feels a bit like a 3D game, but it's obviously 2D, so I guess you can call it 2.5D to be exact. And it's just satisfying as ever to shoot the shit out of everything in sight. You got 8 decently lengthy stages you have to get through in both story and arcade mode, and both versions play pretty much the same, with the exception of the cutscenes like I said before. That's only in the story mode. The arcade mode does have one thing that the story mode doesn't. Aside from a slightly larger roster of playable characters to choose from in the arcade mode than you have in the story mode, yeah, I'll get to that in a little bit, but right under the difficulties option, you get the music option to choose the new music that's in the game, which, don't get me wrong, is rockin' and kick-ass as ever. You can always expect that out of any of these new Contra games. But if you want to go retro, you can pick the retro remix music, and it sounds just like it does on the NES games. And the main level themes, and even the music from the boss fights. I mean, damn. Konami definitely put the extra needed touch of nostalgia in this. But that's only the beginning right there of all the nostalgic throwbacks and Easter eggs. There's tons of them throughout this game. Like any of these guys that just shoot you from, well, any of the Contra games. You got these zombie-looking things from Contra 4. Remember, if the ones that you don't shoot quick enough, they explode into these green balls. You got these guys floating around that try to pick you up and kill you. Remember, from Contra 3? Even the boss fights, like this one here. Yeah, remember from both Contra 1 and 4? Though there's actually two of them, and the first one is like the first Contra game. The second one, on the other hand, is more like Contra 4, because every couple of seconds, it shoots a big deadly laser beam out, which you obviously want to dodge. But that's still not it, because you have this thing to take down. Yeah, it almost resembles that thing in Super C a little bit, except it has all these gun cannon things trying to shoot at you and kill you, which you can take down as an option, but your main focus is this thing. You obviously want to take the barriers down that are guarding it, and then take it down, and be quick, because if you're not, well, look what comes back. This thing that shoots the laser beam. Not to mention, it looks like these walls are closing in on you. So, yeah, I think you want to be quick with taking this thing down. And speaking of Super C, you get this robotic thing. Almost like the mini-boss fight in that game. Which is what this is too as well. As well as these big artillery gun cannons that shoot out flaming ammunition. Or remember that big-ass vehicle that tries to run you over and kill you in the first Contra game? Well, how about it as a mini-boss fight in this game? Or how about these claw grip looking things that come down and kill you? Or these spiked walls that you have to destroy by shooting? Or these flame things that come out that you obviously have to duck to avoid? Or remember that waterfall stage that you had to keep climbing up and dodging these rocks? Yep, it's in the second part of the village level to be exact, and just like that level, this too also has those falling rocks you have to dodge. And speaking of the waterfall stage, look at this boss fight. Yeah, almost resembles that boss fight from that level in the first Contra game. Pretty sick, might I say. Or hell, look at this mini-boss fight in this level. Almost resembles the boss fight at the end of the snow level. Getting back to the first Contra game to be exact. And why not have a boss fight where you shoot the shit out of a giant heart? Haven't seen that before, have we? And this wouldn't be the only one of these that you face in this game. There's actually two of them. The first one, this giant hand is trying to attack you and do all sorts of stuff to try to kill you. Then the second time, it's at the very end of the last level. And what is the last level, may you ask? Well, it's actually not the alien lair, it's the escape ship. And while this one starts out on a ship, after beating the mini-boss fight, which is actually one of the game's main antagonists, you actually do go inside of an alien cave. Again, it's all gooey and gross looking. And it has this deadly green acid at the bottom, which rises up when you get to the points where you have to keep climbing and ascending. So you have to be careful of enemies as well as this acid at the same time, which can really add to the frustration. And even though it's not technically called the alien lair or hive, it still does bear a lot of things from those alien levels in past Contra games. Like those mouth-looking things in both the ceilings and floors that spit out what looks like deadly-looking lint balls. You got these things that shoot out from both sides that you most likely remember from Super C. As well as these egg-looking things that spit out what looks like facehugger creatures. Which is kind of funny because it's pretty obvious that the Contra games were inspired by the Alien franchise. I don't think it's a coincidence, really, considering the Xenomorph was the second to last boss in the first Contra game. And a lot of these things are in the Alien Hive level as well, which is to be expected. And look at this mini-boss fight in the middle of the level. Kinda resembles Ridley from Metroid. Yeah, another gaming series that was inspired by the Alien franchise. Yeah, pretty interesting and coincidental connection there. And a pretty awesome looking mini boss fight, and even a pretty badass looking boss fight at the end of this level. Yeah, I mean, goddamn, look at this beast. Though despite having to shoot the shit out of a heart not once but twice, there's sadly no giant xenomorph, or whatever the hell this thing was at the end of Super C, and of course that made a return in Contra 3, you instead get, at the very end, as I said, the giant heart that you do start out by shooting, until of course, this big-ass creature grabs you, and holy shit, yeah. Now this is a last boss. Okay, I know I'm jumping the gun here by showing you the very end of this game, but should I have said, spoiler alert? Yeah, it should say in the description down below. But yep, this is the final boss in this game, and all I could say is, pretty damn awesome. Almost kind of reminding me a little bit of the final part of the final boss fight in Cuphead. Yeah, another game that you can't help but run a parallel to Contra with, considering it is a shooting game. Only in that one, you have several platforms. In this, you only have two, his two big giant hands, and a bunch of shit being thrown at you, trying to kill you. Yeah, I can't help but bear a similarity and a parallel to that one. Except in this, you're trying to shoot the eyes, and that, you were basically just shooting for the big head. Though I do take it back, because after shooting and taking out his two eyes, his brain is revealed, so you do what Thor should have done to Thanos, and go for the head. And for a last boss fight, yeah, he can really put up a fight, and be occasionally frustrating, even on the easiest difficulty. But yes, like I said before, there are a total of 8 stages in this entire game, with some pretty cool looking 3D elements, even though it's of course, like I said, a 2D side-scrolling game, 2.5D to be exact. There's a few of them where you're on vehicles shooting the shit out of whatever comes at you, like this one where you're inside of this big building, and has a pretty cool boss fight against this beast thing running after you, where you go back and forth. But what's most interesting is that you're in this big circular room, despite, like I said, being a 2D side-scroller, giving it a 3-dimensional feel. I mean, look at this. It's like a big round room that you're going back and forth in. That's pretty awesome. But my favorite one has to be in the snowy tundra where you're pursuing this train, which does start out on foot, on top of the train to be exact, but then shortly after you do get on the vehicle, which is for the rest of the level, with lots of enemies and shit being thrown at you as to be expected. But the mid-boss fight in this, see this giant robot thing that gets on top of the cars to unleash more enemies at you? Well, it's him. Look familiar? Yeah, almost looks like this giant robot boss in the first Contra game. God, there's just no getting away from these retro throwbacks. And this is cool, has sort of a 3-dimensional feel to it. Even though, of course, you can only move and shoot side to side. When he's far back here, the only thing you can do is dodge these blade things that he throws at you, and wait for him to come up front, and then take your shots at him. Rinse and repeat, and he'll go down. And then, after fighting more and more train cars full of enemies, and enemies all around, and shit being thrown at you, what happens to the front of the train? Oh, this big-ass monstrous thing that was inside of it destroys it, and apparently this is the ending boss fight in this level. Damn. Pretty awesome. So yes, you get the point. This is the basic gameplay and concept and design to all of these levels. And of course it wouldn't be a Contra game without the guns. Yes, you start out with the basic pea shooter, and of course, the upgrades that you get from these blimps that usually fly around. Like this one that makes you shoot out the bullets a lot faster. The missiles that you probably remember from Contra 3 and Contra 4, which in my opinion are very helpful because they target and hit any of your enemies or anything that tries to kill you very accurately. You get the laser, which thankfully is more like Contra 3 and not like the first two on NES. I mean, remember how much that one sucked? Yeah, thankfully you can hold the button down and it'll keep rapidly coming out. And it's just as powerful as you remember. You get these things that shoot out very powerful ammunition, but only at a very short range. You get the flame, which is more like Contra 3's version. I kind of like Super C's better, to be honest. It was much more powerful and just had a bigger impact, but yeah, this one's okay. Again, it's very short-ranged, but it does the job. But most importantly, it wouldn't be a Contra game without the granddaddy favorite of them all, the spread. Hell yeah. Now that's what I'm talking about. And yes, you can hold up to 2 upgrades at the same time. And you can switch between either one whenever you want to by pressing the L1 button. And if you do pick up a new upgrade, you'll end up dropping the other one that you're currently using. And yes, you can get that other one back, which will result in you dropping the one you just picked up. So you have to kind of pick and choose right there. And you have to think and choose fast, because obviously these don't sit on the ground forever. They will disappear after a short time. And just like the previous games, if you lose a life while using that upgrade, then you will unfortunately lose it. But thankfully you keep the other one that you're not using. But still, we can always agree, it sucks losing the best ones, like the spread, for example. The spread is your best friend. I mean, like every single entry in this series, it spreads bullets all over the place, making it much easier to take out enemies or anything that's trying to kill you. And especially when you're also doing the so-called overload ability. Yes, this is one of the newest key features in this game. With the spread, it just spreads bullets all over the place like that. Yes, every single one of these upgrades has its own unique overload ability, which you do by pressing and holding the top L button, but with only one drawback being that it comes at the cost of that upgrade. So with the spread, as you can see, it spreads bullets all over the place there for a couple of seconds. I mean, it's definitely helpful, of course, when there's a lot of enemies on screen, or mostly it's best to use these during a boss fight. The laser puts you in sort of a slow motion hyperspeed in which everything slows down. Yeah, this is actually very useful for when you're trying to get through or over any of these deadly traps. You just slow it down and there you go. Makes it a hell of a lot easier. For a brief period, obviously. The M, which actually stands for machine gun to be exact, gives you this temporary barrier to deflect anything being shot at you. Which I'll say, again, is very useful. The flame also gives you a shield, but unlike the machine guns which follows you where you go for a short time, this one just stays depending on whether you're aiming up or in front or behind you. It just stays in that one spot, which is great for deflecting bullets and projectiles, but once you walk outside of it, it's pretty much useless. So, like many of these, it's best to use them for a boss fight because it's not like you're really going anywhere. You're pretty much in that same spot. As for the missile upgrade, the one with the letter H to be exact, it sends out these drones for a short time which aim and shoot at whatever enemies or threats that come at you. Okay, I'll say that's pretty damn helpful. And then finally, that short-range but really powerful weapon upgrade, the one with the letter C to be exact, it sends a barrage of missiles at whatever threat or enemies coming at you. That is killer awesome. And as I said before, and I will say it again, it's best to use these in a boss fight. But otherwise, yes, that's one of the biggest new key features in this game. And I should mention and bring up that it applies to only the 2 main characters that you can select from when you start out with in the story mode. As I said before, you unlock more of these characters when you meet up with them throughout the story mode, giving you the option to play as them with their own little unique abilities. Though you can only play as them in the story mode in the later levels, which is after you unlock each one of them. As for the arcade mode, you get 4 choices of characters to choose from right from the start for whatever reason, and you can actually get a lot more once you unlock all these characters in the story mode. And yes, you can select and play as these unlockable characters right from the start in arcade mode. But unlike story mode, which gives you the option to start at any level you please, and give you of course 3 different save files, in arcade you only get 1 save. So if you quit your game in whatever level, you can continue and reload your progress but from the beginning of whatever level you quit from. So if you start up a new game on arcade mode, it will overwrite and you will lose your progress. If you select a character in arcade, it doesn't let you change, unfortunately. You will play as that character as long as you keep playing. Though if you quit and you resume, then you can switch characters. With 4 of these characters, you get the 2 main ones that should seem familiar. Of course, Bill, who's the typical Contra character. You can crouch to get enemies on the ground, or dodge bullets or any projectiles being shot at you, as well as running and gunning in any different direction, and yes, that includes while jumping. And at certain parts of certain levels, you can grapple onto and climb up the walls. These hook-looking things, which do take precision when jumping onto them, because if you miss them, well, you'll obviously fall, especially over the pits. But you can also grapple onto and hang from the ceiling. And these long pipe-looking things, which, for any of you who played Contra 4 would know, it's nothing new. Though you can not only move when hanging from the ceiling or pipe thing at a regular speed, but you can also perform another new thing called the dash move. Not only from these spots, but you can also perform it on the ground. This is very useful when usually escaping all types of hazards, usually things that are attempting to stomp you or crush you. You time it right, and there you go. And you can not only do it while in the air after jumping, but also double jumping. Yeah, this is yet another new feature, at least for the human characters in any Contra game I recall. With the exception of, if you remember from Contra Hard Corps on Sega Genesis, with that one robot character with the help of his thrusters. So yeah, that's a bit different from this. And, well, most of the characters can perform it in this game. But anyway, getting back to the grappling ability, yes, you hang from the ceiling, or these long pipe-looking things, which is most of the time useful for getting over pits, or any types of hazards that you obviously want to avoid. Or sometimes, especially towards this end level, it's required because really the only thing underneath you is this deadly acid. So the only way to make it out of here alive is clinging onto the ceiling and climbing your way out. As for the other playable character, Lance, pretty much plays exactly the same as Bill. Just a different character with a different physical appearance, shirtless as opposed to Bill, who wears a tank top, and also wears a headband. All the same moves and health meters. As I said, these are the 2 main characters that you can choose from when you start out in both story and arcade mode. But in arcade mode, right from the start, you get not only them 2, but you also get these 2 robot characters called Probotectors. And this is actually really interesting, because in the PAL region, instead of calling it Contra, they called it Probotector, where they replaced the playable human characters with robots. I guess they thought people using machine guns was too violent or something like that. But either way, the gameplay was very similar, with a few other slight changes. And if you're interested to see what it's like, well, unfortunately the NES one is not available on the Contra Anniversary Collection that I reviewed in the past, but some of the sequels are. Otherwise, yeah, they pretty much play and are the same characters as both Bill and Lance, except they're robots. And of course they sound like robots too. In fact, yeah, there's actual spoken dialogue in this game. You get it most of the time in the cutscenes, and every time in story mode you interact and meet up with one of the characters. Whatever comes up in text is spoken out loud. And of course every time you die and spawn back in that spot, you hear them talking as well. Yeah, it's the typical tough guy sounding type of dialogue, and these are obviously from the main characters, but with the Probotectors, as you'd expect, they sound like robots. Not much to add there. But yeah, they pretty much have the same exact moves as those 2 main characters, same health meters if you choose that option of difficulty. As for the other unlockable characters that you get as you progress through the story mode, definitely a horse of a different color here, and this is where it gets interesting. Not to mention, somewhat disappointing. The first one you unlock in story mode, after stage 3 to be exact, is Ariana. She can jump and shoot, she's pretty fast, she's got the double jump as well, But only problem is, when you're grappling and hanging from something, you can't use the dash move to move across from like the ceiling or those long pipe things. Instead, she'll fall. Yeah, she has instead this sliding kick move, which can take out a few enemies, but most of them takes a few of these to try to take them out. But who wants to do that in a Contra game? I mean, come on. When you come across enemies, you just want to shoot them to take them out, right? And also, if you choose the health meter difficulty, only 2 pieces of health instead of 3? Yeah, definitely a downside with this character. Not to mention, with her overloads, you get most of the same ones, except for the missiles that come out of that one with the letter C, you know, the short-range but powerful weapon upgrade. It instead summons this big spinning vortex above you. And while it doesn't seem to do anything at first, it actually eats up the enemy's projectile that is being fired at you. So, okay, that's somewhat useful. But otherwise, yeah, I would say the barrage of missiles is still much more useful than that, for the most part. Lucia, on the other hand, who you unlock after beating Stage 4 in story mode, definitely an advantage over Ariana, I would say. At least when it comes to her health meter. I mean, she thankfully has 3 pieces of health instead of 2. And when grappled to the ceiling or that long pipe thing, she can thankfully do the dash move and doesn't fall down like Ariana does. She also has the grappling ability that most of you probably remember out of Contra 4 that your character has. Yep, you press the correct button to do so, and she does just that. She can grapple from a lower position without having to jump. But speaking of jumping, unfortunately, she can't double jump. Really? Not to mention, you know the spread? She doesn't actually use the spread. Instead, she shoots out this V or arrow shape looking things, if you keep tapping the button, that is. But if you hold it in, the longer you hold, it charges up, boom, shoots out this huge wave right there. Definitely handy against not only a ton load of enemies in front of you, or any of these machine gun looking things, or even boss fights. And it's even different when you use the overload ability on it. Yeah, it puts what looks like a barrier around you, and then after a couple of seconds, it seemingly wipes out anything around you. Okay, that's somewhat useful. And then the last unlockable character you get in the story mode, after beating the second to last level to be exact. Obviously, he'd only be playable in the very last level in story mode. Arcade mode is obviously a different story. You can play as him all the way from the beginning. But he's another robot character. Yep, as if we hadn't had enough of these. And he's named Stanley Ironside. Sounds a little more like a Transformer than a Contra character. And while he can jump, and sort of double jump, he's mostly known for hovering. This is a cool idea, trying to get over pits, being that you can only do it for a brief couple of seconds, but it can be kinda tricky to control. Yeah, I'm not too crazy about this, honestly. And like Lucia, he too can also grapple from a low position to either a ceiling or any of those long pipe-looking things. But what he mostly has over those 2 women, or any of the characters to be exact, 4 pieces of health, if you choose that difficulty. Now that's an advantage right there. And, well, not 1, but 2 weapon upgrades for him are actually different. The laser shoots out these ring-looking laser beams. Okay. But the overload ability, it shoots out this huge-ass laser beam that you can kind of control for a little bit with the movement, and believe me, it's as powerful as hell. Definitely useful for boss fights or taking out a huge ton load of enemies in front of you. But the machine gun upgrade, it shoots out these bigger ball-looking bullet things, but they go at a much shorter range and actually turn around a bit. Yeah, they don't keep going straight ahead, so you gotta really be precise when using this one with this character. As well as its overload. Instead of giving you the shield barrier, it instead erupts in this little firework fountain-looking thing. But it's very short-ranged and, well, it doesn't seem as powerful as you'd expect. So yeah, I prefer the shield barrier. At least that's useful for trying to deflect any enemy projectiles or anything that's trying to kill you, even if it's for just a brief couple of seconds. You can also unlock all these other characters in the perk shop. Yeah, that's right. Every time you beat a level in the story mode, you rack up a certain amount of points, or credits as the game calls them. And yes, it can be done in the arcade mode too as well, but you don't get them every time you complete a level. No, you get them every time you lose all your lives and get a game over screen. Whether or not you choose to continue or quit, either way, that's how you rack them up in that mode. With story mode, you get them every level you beat. And you can use these points to buy just about anything in this perk shop. Whether it's starting out with certain weapon upgrades, a barrier, which gives your player temporary invincibility after they die and come back. You can unlock different music, add 1 or 2 pieces of extra health to their health meter if you're playing it on that mode to be exact. Definitely necessary if you're playing as Ariana. Each character has their own different spirit that you have to purchase, which gives them an upgrade or an ability that they don't have. Yeah, each one is different. You get automatic level ups. You got one that gives you an extra life. You got one where if you use an overload, it restores an extra piece of health. You get one where if you die, you still hold on to your upgrade. And I should also mention that you have a limit of being able to hold only up to 2 of these. Or, if you want, you could just pick 1 and then none. Or hell, you could choose to hold none of them if you want to. If you feel like it eases up the difficulty too much and you want a little more of a challenge, you know, to make the game a little more easier for you if you think it's too hard. But otherwise, yes, you can unlock speedrun mode where you're under a time constraint. You can even unlock extreme mode, which requires playing either arcade or story mode all the way through on the hard difficulty. And then if that's not enough, you can get extreme ultra mode. With this, it just requires purchasing the extreme mode from the perk shop. As if the game isn't hard enough. But here's something you can unlock if you put in the classic Konami code. Yes, that makes a return for any of you fans who played the first game on NES. The 30 Live perk. That's right, and this should work for just about any version of this game, including the Switch version, which is what I'm playing it on. But I don't recommend doing this while the console is docked, because apparently, yes, there can be some lag into it. So I recommend doing this in handheld mode. But yes, like the code suggests, up, up, down, down, left, right, B and A. And you should hear a little chiming sound, and the notice that comes up saying you unlocked it, alongside a couple hundred extra credits right there. But it should be available to buy in the shop. But at that many credits, you're going to have to play through the story or arcade mode quite a bit. Rack 'em up, because it requires that many. But it's great to see that Konami has acknowledgments for some things that should never die. And 30 lives, definitely necessary if you're looking to unlock those extreme mode perks, as well as these 3 unlockable characters that also require beating the story mode through. Not too hard there, but they also require a shit ton of credits too as well. And while some of these may seem a little obscure, you have Brad Fang, who's a wolf with a machine gun for an arm. But for any of you who played Contra Hard Corps on Sega Genesis, he was in there as a playable character. So, okay, that's fine. As well as this robot character named Brownie. Slightly altered with his appearance, but okay, that's fine. And then you got Sheena, who's yet another slightly altered version of a playable character in Contra Hard Corps. Not only that, she's also a hidden unlockable playable character in Contra 4. Okay, that's pretty cool. But yes, those are the purchasable characters in the perk shop. As I said, rack up a lot of credit points. And not only you got that, but you also have challenge mode. Yes, that's right. Not the first time in a Contra game, because if any of you played Contra 4, it was in there too as well. After beating through the entire game on any difficulty to be exact. But unlike that game, where I was able to beat several of them and unlock some pretty awesome content, including the 2 NES Contra games, on this game, I've barely been able to beat maybe 1 or 2 of these. I mean, the challenge and difficulty on some of these is ridiculous. I mean, look at this. You have to try to beat out time limits here There's some you have to make it through without dying once. There's ones that you have to try to use your ammunition wisely without using it all and running out. There's rematches with boss fights. I mean, yeah, good luck, because these are as hard as hell. I mean, god damn. Aside from that, I would say this is, like I said, a decent Contra game. Its arcade and story mode is good. It's obviously the best part of the game that you want to play all the way through, with some rockin' kick-ass music from default, or some of the old school music that you can unlock and use as an option, alongside a bunch of other nostalgic nods as I mentioned before. Yeah, it's great to see that kind of stuff in this game, with some really cool three-dimensional looking graphics in the two-dimensional style game, which is, as I said, 2.5D. But I feel like it does leave a little to be desired, because it could have used a little extra polish and a little more content added in there as well. Like maybe some of those 3D stages that you've seen like out of the first or fourth Contra game, or even those overhead view stages out of Super C. No, not like those ones out of Contra 3. Let's not even go there. God, I'm getting disoriented just thinking about those. I mean, the vehicle levels are great, but for the price tag of $40, which actually I got it on sale at the Nintendo eShop for pre-ordering it before its release date, it's really not worth that price. Even with the frustrating as hell challenge mode, it still doesn't make up and make it worth that price value. Maybe it could have added more content, like unlocking some more old school Contra games, like perhaps Contra 4. I know DS games would be rather difficult, but come on. Contra 4 did that by letting you unlock and play the two NES Contra games. Why not this one? And then there's the load screens. Yeah, you get a lot of these in between levels and at the start of both arcade and story and even the challenge mode. And they are pretty damn lengthy. I mean, load times? More like load as shit if you ask me. And this is the Switch version in case you're wondering. I'm not sure if the PlayStation or Xbox or Steam version have the same issue, but you know me, I like to usually go for this version because I like to play it at home and on the go. Otherwise, yes, it's great to see that local multiplayer is acknowledged in this game, unlike a lot of other games nowadays that doesn't really do this as much. It's nice to be able to play with other people under the same roof on the same console. I mean, for any of you who played any of these Contra games on 2-player, you can actually play up to 4 people at the same time on here, which, okay, it does seem a little chaotic, but come on. This is an arcade-style running, gunning, shooting game. This is where it's all at right here. Teaming up to take down and shoot the hell out of aliens. And as great as this is, this also brings me to my biggest complaint I have with this game, which is the thing I was looking forward to most. There's no online multiplayer. Like, seriously? I mean, this is what most games are known for nowadays. Seriously, the developers of this game, you gotta get with the times here. They had it in Shredder's Revenge, Streets of Rage 4, hell, even some of the games on the Cowabunga collection. Yes, even some of the old school Ninja Turtle games. Sure, it was a bit laggy, but it's there, and it's an option. Maybe in future updates they'll have this added on, because if they didn't, that would be a real shame, considering this is my biggest flaw with the game, which definitely keeps it from being great. Otherwise, yes, like I said, it's good, but these flaws definitely keep it from being great, and definitely not my best game, considering it was my most anticipated of 2024. For $40, it's definitely not worth it. If you got half of that, $20, you can actually get the Anniversary Collection, which I already reviewed, and I already have more than enough praise for that one. I mean, it's a great collection of old school Contra games. This one, on the other hand, good, but could have been a lot better. So, my final verdict is, I give it just a plain 2-year motes up. A decent game, but like I said, could have been much, much better. So, till next time, happy gaming.